Everyone's assets, from your bank account to your brokerage account to your cryptocurrency account, I mean, just about everything is digits. It's numbers in the ether. You go to the bank, if everyone goes to the bank at the same time and says, give us our money, you're not getting it. It's not all there. In fact, they're woefully undercapitalized. They have next to nothing in terms of reserve. Coinbase is an example, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the United States. If they file bankruptcy, and they actually said the word bankruptcy, if they file bankruptcy, that people who have coins held on the exchange will most likely lose all of them. So everything that we're talking about, whether it be undercapitalization in banks, whether it be that the stocks that you think you own are digits on a screen because you don't hold the certificates anymore, no one has bearer bonds anymore, no one has anything. And so when you talk about physical metal, these are tangible items that you hold in your possession free from counterparty risk. And I think that is the delineation here, is that wealth is digits on a screen in the ether, and having physical metal with the removal of counterparty risk is really huge. It's important. It's relevant. And I think you can start to see that as things start to get tenuous around us. I think it's important to understand that when we talk about valuation, if you envision the US dollar as water inside of a bathtub, and gold and silver are sitting on the ledge of the bathtub, they're sitting on the ledge looking down at the water, and maybe the water is all the way up to the top of the tub. But when you pull the plug on the tub, and the water starts to drop, and it depends upon how far the dollar drops in this case, it's not that gold and silver are getting worth more money, it's that the dollar is becoming worth less, on its way to worthless. I mean, look at, as an example, Weimar Republic, Germany. And it was a long time ago, after World War I. But when you go back and you look at the fact that people would take wheelbarrows full of Reich notes to the store to buy a loaf of bread, and they'd come back outside after checking to see if there was bread to be had, and only to find that the currency was laying on the ground, but the wheelbarrow had been stolen. Point of it is that it depends how far the dollar ultimately falls. What gold and silver represent and have represented for 5,000 years is immutable wealth. And in times of uncertainty and speculation, I think it's never been more important to own gold and silver, because quite frankly, I think that the days of the dollar as the world reserve currency, as the singular world reserve currency, are coming to an end. When you see Saudi Arabia selling their oil to China for yuan, when you see Nigeria selling their oil to China for yuan, when you see Russia selling their arms to India for rupee, and their oil and their gas and their coal to China for yuan, when you see this type of rhetoric, when you see the weaponizing of the dollar kicking Russia out of SWIFT, when you see the consequences to the dollar being usurped as the singular petrodollar settlement currency for energy and for oil, it's the beginning of the end for the dollar. Do you see how we are slightly moving away from the dollar and its hegemony as the singular world reserve currency, as the petrodollar? And when that moment happens, when OPEC comes out and says, you know what, we're being protected by Russia and China, we've decided that it's in our best interest, in the world's best interest, that we open up oil payments to other currencies. When that happens, bang, just like that, when those dollars come flooding home, they will create hyperinflation in this country. If you think inflation is bad now, watch what happens when the majority of the world dumps dollars and it completely loses all its value. When that happens, interest rates spike, and stocks, bonds, and real estate collapse at the same time. Stocks, bonds, real estate, and the dollar all collapse, and it's all in the hands of the Saudis. If the Saudis say, you know what, we're moving a different direction, and OPEC is going to offer oil in other currencies, it's over for the US dollar. And that's when an ounce of silver really becomes important, because the dollar is being destroyed, as all fiat currencies are. The dollar is just the prettiest mare in the slaughterhouse. Never been more important to have alternatives to what I think is a dying Keynesian system, a fiat system with no backing. And I really do believe the days of the dollar as a singular world reserve currency are coming to an end. I think gold and silver are wealth. You don't want to inject speculation. All I can tell you is that when currency becomes a hot potato, when nobody wants it any longer, when the world is dumping it, owning physical precious metals will have much greater importance. It's not to get wealthy, it is wealth. And in periods of great dollar uncertainty and instability and geopolitical instability, I don't think it's ever been more important, ever. I really don't. I've always tried, at least in terms of dollars, go 50-50. I think silver is a much better value right now. And with a gold to silver ratio of 82 or 3-1, the ability to accumulate silver and trade it to gold when that ratio corrects, which it will, it's averaged 42-1 for the last 200 years nearly. And it's coming out of the ground at 7-1, but it's priced at 83-1. It's 12 times undervalued from what it should be in terms of its geologic footprint. So right now I'd go heavier on silver with the intention of switching to gold. And a lot of people don't agree with me on this. I mean, a lot of people think silver is ultimately the place to be. And while I really do like silver and wouldn't be bummed out if I was stuck with a whole bunch of silver, the fact that gold was reclassified at the world's only other tier 1 reserve asset tells me that gold is ultimately the place you want to have the bulk of your money, but not yet. Not until that ratio corrects. Look, when I started talking about this originally in 2010 and did my first podcast because of it, the ratio was 85-1. It was the second time in human history that it had ever gotten that high. I told everyone to switch their gold to silver. Within 8 months, we had 37-1 with $50 silver, and we are in rarefied air. It's only been here a few times in 5,000 years. So the idea is if it's coming out of the ground at 7-1 globally, it's being mined at 7-1 because it's found in nature in something called epithermal, which is very close to the surface. So the big deposits were found long ago. So if it's coming out of the ground at 7-1, but priced at 83-1, you could argue it's 12 times undervalued. So when do you do it? I don't know. I mean, I don't think you want to wait till it gets to its geologic ratio of 7-1, but anytime it gets near its 200-year average of 42-1, that's a double right there. So in other words, if you had an ounce of gold, and in theory, you get 83 ounces of silver for that 1 ounce of gold. Well, when it gets to 41.5, you double what you start with. I ultimately feel gold is the place to be, but silver is the pathway into getting much more gold. Silver can make you wealthy if you own enough of it. The only problem this go around is that getting wealthy in silver may come at the expense of the dollar. Rising gold and silver is the bathtub water draining. And that's, the point that why I don't talk about gold and silver as a wealth creator. It is a wealth preserver. Still buys you the same thing it did. That's what it does. It preserves your purchasing power. And that's the most important thing. Even if the dollars that we measure it against are skewed, the dollar is the prettiest mare in the slaughterhouse. It's the best of the worst fiat currencies. But if we find another country come out to say, you know what, we're pegging our new digital yuan, we're going to call it the new digital BRICS currencies, because Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa are all joining in, and we're all pegging 15,000 metric tons of gold to this, each to 100,000 metric tons of gold. We're pegging to this new digital BRICS currency with the immutability and veracity of that gold held on a distributed ledger. Everything will make sense very, very quickly. That, the world will flock to a system backed by stability, strength, and an asset rather than one that's backed by 130 trillion in debt. And I think that's what we face. And this is why you own gold and silver and mitigate your exposure. So whether you have more silver or more gold, it doesn't matter in the end. In the end, you want to mitigate your exposure to the dollar.
The key narrative from Andy Schectman's discussion focuses on the vulnerability of digital wealth and the enduring value of precious metals, particularly gold and silver. Andy Schectman argues that most modern wealth exists merely as digits in the ether, from bank accounts to cryptocurrency, all subject to counterparty risk. Meanwhile, physical precious metals offer tangible wealth free from such risks. They warn that the U.S. dollar's status as the world's reserve currency is under threat, citing examples of countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China moving away from dollar-based trade. The speaker suggests that if OPEC decides to accept other currencies for oil, it could trigger a flood of dollars returning to the U.S., potentially causing hyperinflation. In this scenario, they believe physical precious metals, particularly silver, which they argue is currently undervalued, would serve as a crucial store of value, not necessarily to create wealth, but to preserve purchasing power during times of monetary instability.